Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
And I'm Scott Warr. And No One Gets There Alone is the title of Dr. Rob Bell's new book, where he explores the psychological and emotional aspects of success, not only in sports, but in life, because we want to become better human beings too. I think Don says that at the beginning of the podcast. Rob's a sports psychologist and a frequent guest here at Trail Runner Nation. Some of the other podcasts that we've done with Dr. Rob revolve around some of his other books. Recently, and if you're watching the YouTube simulcast of this, there's no simulcast, it's recorded. You'll see in the background a couple posters of some of his books. I Can't Wait to Be Patient and Puke and Rally. And if I remember, I'll put the links to those episodes in the show notes. Rob's with his new book, he's going to help us understand that while individual effort is crucial, no achievement is solely a product of solo endeavor. The book that he wrote emphasizes the importance of relationships and connectivity in achieving personal and professional goals. Dr. Rob Bell, welcome back to the show.
Boy, being a 3-time guest, man, I really feel honored. Special.
I think it's been more than 3 times, Rob. You've been on more than 3. Those were just 2 that I mentioned.
I had you guys on my podcast, so that's 4 then.
Oh, that's right.
So
that's right.
We can count that.
I'm excited, man.
Hey, Dr. Bell, a great book and one that's just right down if we were bowling, that was right down the middle of the lane, because this book is about trail running, and that's why it was easy and fun to read. As I opened it up, the pages kept going because it felt right. It resonated with our community. And I imagine it felt like that when you were writing it.
Well, see, the best make it look easy, but no, it's never that way when you're writing it, man. But I do. I mean, I know the goal for every one of my books because I'm not that intelligent. I just want to make it. I call them airplane books. I want somebody to get on a flight from LA to Indianapolis or Indianapolis to Orlando or Austin to Boston and be finished the book. So short bites, say, what can I take from this that's going to help me like in this situation here? And that's why I signed the book on this one. No One Gets There Alone. Like, would you stop? Because that's sort of the basis behind it.
Hey, Rob, the burning question everybody wants to know is, did you write the book alone?
Oh, man, great question. Great question. I'm glad you asked that. The answer is no.
Hey, Freeman, you got to laugh at some of my jokes. Every once in a while, you got to laugh.
Oh, you were on delay, Scott. I didn't get it. I just knew it was funny because everybody else laughed.
Yeah. I put a lot of people in the front of this, man, because that was the one point I was like, well, at least I don't have to write this part alone. And that's why I just look at it in life, right? Like so much connectivity, but there's so many different people that connected to this book and contributed to the book. And that's why, I mean, there were a couple pages of people I had to recognize for this one that was different from the other books in particular. A lot of interviews that had to be done.
Rob, you start off in the book talking about an experience you had where you had help getting it done. I'd like to hear that story right from you. I read it in the book. It was fascinating. I'd love to hear your rendition.
Sure,
Scott and I are prepared, at least I'm prepared, to tell a story about how I got something done and I wasn't alone. And so we're going to follow up your story with a couple of our own and move through some of the aspects of this book. Can you tell that story about how you didn't get something done alone?
Yeah, absolutely. I signed up for a half Ironman. It was a half Ironman that was coming to town. And there were 3 issues, though, with this half Ironman. Number 1 is I had not been training for a half Ironman, right? Number 2 is I didn't even own a bike. Like, you have to have a bike in order to do Ironmans or half Ironmans. And I had to borrow somebody's bike. And then the third issue is this race was in 2 weeks. And so I did what any insane type of athlete does, right? Like, I signed up because I was like, well, I just want to test myself, see if I could do it. So I had to borrow a friend's bike. And the night before the race, he asked me, like, or I asked him, I said, what would happen if I got a flat tire out there? And he said, well, would you know how to change it? I said, buddy, I haven't ridden in 10 years. Like, these last 2 weeks, that's the most I've ridden. I'm borrowing your bike. Of course not. I wouldn't know how to change it. He said, well, I tell you what, when, there's gator skin tires on there, you're going to be okay. Like, how about you just don't worry about it? Great, man. Love it. One less thing. And so the swim of the half Ironman goes fine. I'm at mile 30 on the bike, and I'm cresting the only hill in Indiana. And bam, my back tire goes flat. I get up to the top of this hill, and this is really important part because I get up to the top of this hill, dismount my bike, and sure enough, I got a flat tire. Don't have anything to change it. I'm like a 4-year-old kid. I'm scrambling around because, I mean, no one's going to stop. Racers are cresting the hill and they're taking off. And at the same time, Boy Scouts are turning over in their grave, right? At the lack of preparation. And I'm just thinking in my head, like, how could you be so stupid? How could you be so unprepared in this? And, 7-8 minutes pass. And just because you're having a bad day, like the clock's still going. And as I'm reserved myself, like I'm going to wait for this paddy wagon to come around, pick me up, take me in, or I'm going to have to hoof this bike back in. A racer pulls over in front of me and asks me, do you have anything to change the tire? I said, I don't have anything. And he reaches back in this little pouch and he unlocks the pouch and hands me his cartridge, air cartridge, and a tire. And I'm like, I bend down to pick him up, and it was a Disney moment, I'm like, wow, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Like you saved my life. And now what, right? Like, now what am I going to do with this stuff? I'm in a highly stressful environment. I'm trying to change a bike tire that I haven't ridden in 10 years. And as I'm thinking that, another racer pulls over and looks at me and says, do you know what you're doing? And I said, I have no idea. So he dismounts his bike. He walks over to me and says, well, let's get you fixed. And the ordeal took him like 3 minutes, changed my tire. And I was able to finish the race. And that moment, that was a hinge moment, because from that moment on, everything had changed, right? It was like, I told people, and I finished the race, I wouldn't recommend doing it without much training, right? A lot of painful on the run but I finished, and I told people then what happened. And then the question arose in my mind, Rob, would you have stopped? And the answer to that point was, I would not have stopped. And it didn't have anything to do with me not being a benevolent person. It just had to do with, I had no idea that stopping was something you did in these races. I wasn't even a trail runner at this point. And it was like, up till that point, the answer was no. But after, the answer is like, absolutely, yes, I would. And it's a question, would you stop, has to be answered before it's even asked. And the reason why is because our design, this is by default. I mean, it's by design, it's not by default. And what I mean by that is our whole attitude in our self-protection mode is when things go wrong, it's protect yourself at all times, right? Like when we lose confidence in ourselves, we don't reach out to other people. We kind of implode, right? Like we disengage from other people. And so would you stop? If you just think about, if we're driving and we see somebody pulled over on the side of the road, would you stop? You have maybe a half second to think about whether you're going to stop and help somebody or not. And that's why it's a question that has to be answered before it's even asked. You have to be in that mindset of, I'm going to focus on helping out other people before you kind of get in that situation. And so from there on, every race that I'm getting into, I was focused on who can I help out. So when the full Ironman came to town, the next year, I actually went to that one. But, a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, and then a marathon. Like, I went into that race, who am I going to be able to help? And so at mile 80, when I saw that one guy, he had a flat tire, I didn't hesitate. I pulled over to help him. Now, Don Scott, I'm sure he wanted somebody else, because my bike changing tires hadn't improved that much. But at least there was the whole mindset of, man, I want to be able to help out other people. And that's where I think, look, a better us is what makes a better you, and a better you is what makes a better us.
So you're standing there saying, go ahead, Scott.
Rob, as I hear your story, and I'm asking the same question to me, I was taught by great mentors in trail running that it's not really even a question, do you stop? That's just something we do. However, it's a matter of circumstance. And when I say that, you mentioned, if someone stopped along the side of the road, do you stop and help? And I don't know whether I do that as readily as if I would stop if someone was sitting on the side of a trail with their hands, their face in their hands. So I think that I can improve, like you were saying, I can improve and say, who can I help today? How can I help today? And not just make it circumstantial on the trail.
So I'm going to follow that up, Scott. Your situation, you have probably, because I think we all have, even people listening, have somebody's alongside of the road, and we go, bummer, and you just keep going. Well, there's
exactly.
There's a ton of people behind us, and it's not that bad of a day, and you've got somewhere to go. Now, if the situation was it's stormy, there's snow coming down, and there's nobody behind you, and it's just about to set, the sun is about to set, you have a different situation playing out, and I'll bet you'd pull over then in a second.
Yeah,
at least I hope.
You're
at
right.
least a Scott War I know that would do that. I would be happy if I saw that white pickup coming up. I'd say, that's Scott. I know he'll pull over. That's the guy, kind of guy he is.
So, Rob, tell us about that hinge moment when you changed your perception, not perception, your mindset as you go into the races, that who am I going to help today? How has that helped you personally and athletically?
Yeah. So the mindset's just totally different heading in, right? It's just like, just put me in a situation where I'm going to be able to help somebody. And that's the part that I think it takes a lot of the pressure off in terms of, all right, man, am I going to be okay? Like, what's my performance going to be like? And it totally takes all the focus away from me, and it's going to put it on something else. And when we do that, it helps out our own performance because I'm not stuck inside my head. And there's a great example of that one. Look at Des Linden, right, who was the last American female to win the Boston Marathon. And if you go and you look at that story, it was the worst conditions that they had for the Boston Marathon in 2018 now, right? And it was like worst conditions that they've had. And, a headwind the entire way, 30 degrees and then raining. And it was horrible conditions. So the pace was way off. And for the first part of the race, she was like, not feeling it, not doing well, and had told one of her competitors, like Shalane Flanagan, another American, hey, I'm going to drop out of the race. Like, things aren't going well. I'm dropping. If you need me to protect the win, if you need me to do anything, like, hey, I'm here for you. Took her focus away from her, focused on somebody else. Then what happened was, Shalane Flanagan about a mile later said, yeah, I mean, you mind holding up, running with me, catch up the pack. I'm going to go use the bathroom. Goes use the bathroom, come back, she waits, they catch up to the lead pack. And then what happens is Shalane, and this is what happens to all of us in life, we get that second win. Man, if we can just stay in the game long enough, we get that second win. And that's what happened with Des Linden. She got the second win. At mile 13, is Shalane had fallen back. Des was now with the lead group. And at mile 20, she was in first place and was able to hang on. And that's how she ended up winning the Boston Marathon. She focused on somebody else. We get stuck inside our own head. And we get stuck inside our own head, that's when we're behind enemy lines. And that's the point of when we can focus on other people. Whatever this, and it branches out then into life. Whatever is going on in our life, our problems are still going to be there. But we ruminate on it, right? We obsess about it and we get stuck. And now we're not able to make any decisions. When if I can just call somebody, if I can just check in with somebody else, hey man, if I can just help somebody else out, our problems are still going to be there, but now we feel better about ourselves and we help out and create a better us. And when we come back to our own situation, now we have a better perspective to it. And that's how it helps out our own performance, is simply by doing that.
Yeah, that moment that those two racers stopped and gave you some tools, and the next one came up and helped you change that tire, those were hinge point moments. They didn't know it, but they changed you and how you race. In fact, helped inspire a book because of that moment. So sometimes when we do something and offer a hand, we don't know how meaningful that is in that person's life or how it changes the direction. And that could go on for a generation or two. Just the little things sometimes are big things. Like that rock you tripped on the other day, Scott. You thought it was big, but it was very tiny. Little things make big differences sometimes.
Yeah. Little hinges swing big doors. Oh,
Ooh, that's a good
yeah.
good one.
I mean, I got the quotes, man. I can keep that stuff going. But that's why I love Gandhi's quote, because he said, "You don't know the results from your action, but if you take no action, there'll be no results." So it's like you don't
Right.
we're planting trees that we're never going to see, right? We plant trees whose shade that other people are going to enjoy, and that's the mission of it. But if we plant enough, like, it's going to come back. There's going to be other people that are going to help us when we need it. Now, especially when the mental health issues happen in our lives, because it happens to everybody. We got to create that us now, instead of when we're going to hit that crisis point and just hoping that somebody's going to be able to help us out. Like, if we create that network now, man, while we are healthy, they're going to be there for us when we're injured, man, or when we are struggling. That's the point that I think really becomes important in terms of creating a better us.
And you got to build that bridge early. You can't hope it's there when it's there. You've got to make that network, build those relationships, and extend and offer that help before you're in a crisis. You look around, if you haven't built that bridge, it's not going to be there. Gandhi didn't say that, but
right. I think sometimes it's tough to accept help. Right, that's the toughest thing. Like, somebody's running on by, man, you struggling, you doing okay? Do you need anything? No, I'm fine. I'm just puking here, But I still remember the guy that was like, that gave me like those gingers, right? Yeah, man, that helped a lot, right? He doesn't know that.
Yeah.
But that helped out in that moment, man. It was like, that was the part of being able to help out other people.
So before the podcast, I challenged Scott. I said, Scott, let's both come up with a story. Don't tell me what it is, and I won't tell you mine. But let's come up with a story that where we've had somebody help along the way. And should I go first or should you?
Oh, yeah, you got to go first, I think.
Okay. Well, I had a story planned, but listening to Rob's story, I changed my story. And it was before I ever became a trail runner. I visited my parents' house, and I was running, and there was a bike ride that I used to do that was 14 miles. And I was a young man at the time, and I thought, 12 years old or whatever. And I thought, wow, that's an epic ride to be able to go that far and back. I must be in the Guinness Book of World Records somehow. And then I thought, I wonder if I could ride that, if I could run that, as I started getting into running. And off I went, and it was a great run, and it was on the road. And I'd turn around and come back, and all of a sudden I experienced my first ever bonk. What's going on here? And I'm looking at in my experience. I don't have any experience. I don't know what's happening. It's just legs are heavy. Things aren't good. I wish I was somewhere else. And so I see this orange stand. These guys selling oranges. And I think, that's what I need. I need food. That looks good. I need water. I need food. And I thought I could get water, but the school that I was looking at was closed, so I really couldn't get to it. So I'm coming back and thinking, oh, that fruit would be full of fluid and energy. I don't have any money. I go, I have a ring. I could trade my ring for an orange. That would be a good deal. And I thought, you know what? I'm probably not going to die from this, but I might die from not having this ring when I come back. So I continue on the way, and I'm sure I'm looking like my head's down, and I'm just shuffling along. And these guys on this bike come up, and the first time I ever saw it, he offers me a vanilla bean goo. And I said, oh, what's this? And he goes, you need it. I can see it. And I ripped it open. I had it. It was the best tasting goo I've ever had to this day. That's the one I remember. I never considered that as a solution. I didn't know it existed. And these two riders saw my situation, handed that to me, and that was a hinge point for me. And it wasn't even on the trail, but I became aware of, number one, you need nutrition, and number two, you need people. So that's my first story. Not that I have a book full of them like Rob hasn't here that we're looking at, and no one gets there alone. So I'm interested in your story, Mr. War.
Well, this was probably the hardest thing to come up with because there's been so many. I can't think of a race that I ever participated in that I didn't have the generosity and help of other people. I think back, the doctors that bandaged my feet at mile 30 of Western States because I had just run 30 miles in the snow and my feet were just emaciated. They were just such bad shape. and they sat me down and calmed me down and taped my feet up. But the one that I remember the most, it was my first 50K. And I was out there and I was having a good day. And I was probably, I don't know, maybe 18 miles in or maybe 15 miles in. And I started getting leg cramps. And I had never had leg cramps before. And these leg cramps were debilitating. I mean, I'd be walking along and all of a sudden I'd almost start, I just jump like I got bit by a snake or something. And as I came into the aid station, I didn't know too many people, but I saw one person I knew, Mike Hernandez. He's a local legend runner here. And I knew Mike, and I was hoping that he remembered me. And I said, Mike, I am having leg cramps like crazy. What do I do? And he goes, it's all right. Slow down. He said, take these two, fill your bottles with his electrolyte drinks. Here's 3 Succeed caplets that he took out of his own fanny pack or whatever he had. Take these, drink both water bottles before you get to the next aid station, and don't run between here and the next aid station. And I go, Mike, it's a race. And he goes, yeah, I know. Listen to me and you'll be fine. And I was so grateful for that day. I finished the first 50K, and I remember Mike Hernandez helping me that day.
You know, when someone contributes information with a lot of certainty and he has a reputation like this runner, Mike Hernandez, you just assume it must be correct. You hold on to that as truth and gospel, and it's just, you just know it's going to work. And so, you know, just helping someone along just with a good encouraging word is very powerful too.
He could have told me, from here for the next 100 yards, I want you to do cartwheels. And that's going to allow the blood in your muscles and the lactate in your muscles to filter down out of your legs into your upper body. If he would have said that with the confidence he shared with me, with what he did tell me, I would have done it.
You think that would have worked, Dr. Bell?
It might have. We'll try it next time.
You know, in the book, you bring up competition. Competition is me versus me instead of me versus everyone else. And I think that it fits real well with this helping other people, either with advice or a piece of gear or a piece of nutrition. When it's you versus you, me versus me on the run, it takes a different look. Can you talk a little bit about what you meant by that in the book?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's an athlete. Our office is just different, right? It's like I run into people all the time, and they're like, you know, you work with athletes. I'm not an athlete, and they'll say that, and I'll be like, no, you are an athlete. Because essentially, what does it mean to be an athlete? It means you compete, and you're competing against the most difficult opponent, and that difficult opponent is going to be your mind. And your mind has a strategic advantage over you because it just has one job, and that's to keep you safe. Well, what's the mind want to do when you start getting the leg cramps, right? Hey, man, that's it. Cash it in. Just sit here, drop out. When our mind does not care about our goals, doesn't care about us being the best that we can be. So we're always competing against that difficult opponent that knows your hurts, hangups, and headaches, knows, and, you know, it's figured you out. Everyone's weakness is a little bit different. So that's who we're competing against. And when we realize that that's the real challenge, that's who we're competing against, not only do we take more ownership of it, but that's the part of like, look, we're always going to be an athlete. How do we get outside of our own head? How are we going to be beating that? And one of the simplest things that we can do, just like this, if you want to change the way you feel about somebody, change the way you treat them. If you want to change the way you feel about yourself, change your environment. Simple things that we can do, but not easy. But that's why I always say everyone's an athlete. Our office is different, and that's who we're competing against.
Yeah, treat someone else different, and made me think, well, sometimes maybe we need to treat ourselves different. Maybe we need to have a different language or a different
right. And so that's the thing, right? That's the piece. It's like that is a high level of self-awareness of really doing this internal work that you have to do. There's nothing wrong with it, right? It's great stuff. But what's the simpler solution? The simpler solution is I can tell Don things that I don't tell myself. I can tell Scott hey, man, just stay with it, right? Left foot, right foot.
Yeah.
Don, man, you're doing great, man. Just find your good rhythm. And then I tell Ryan or I tell somebody else, hey, man, you're doing really awesome. Like, I'm just so proud of you. Who am I really coaching? I'm coaching myself. And that's the thing.
Right.
Like we tell things to ourselves that we never tell our worst enemy, but we tell other people things that we don't even tell ourselves. That's the way we get outside our own head. And that's the real benefit. The most selfish thing that you can do is to focus on somebody else. And that's Arthur Ashe.
So Mike Hernandez tells Scott to just walk. I don't want you to run, and drink these 2 bottles. That's your task right now. If Scott said that to himself, he might have beat himself up. I'm a loser. I can't. I'm at mile 30 of a 100-mile race. What am I doing walking? I'm probably not even going to finish it. But I hope that you wouldn't say that, Scott, but with Mike saying, here's what you need to do so you can finish, it takes a different feel to it. So we need to treat ourselves a little better, I think, or at least I know I do in these situations.
But that's the
Hey,
piece,
Rob,
right?
there's a lot of...
Yeah, go ahead.
Go, Rob.
No, I just had an ancillary point there. It was the Don's wisdom.
Oh, it's good. That's all we do. Wait till you hear what Scott's about to say.
It was just when we focus on other people, it's the simplest thing that we can do, man. And who we really coaching, we're coaching ourselves up at the same time. Like, let me give you a perfect example of that, if I may. Whenever we volunteer, we rarely leave that volunteer experience saying, boy, you know what? Those kids are just so lucky I was here to help them out, right? Like, we say the opposite. We say, those kids helped me out more than I helped them. Well, how, right? We donated our time. How did they help us out? Well, they gave us perspective. They gave us gratitude. They gave us an appreciation for our own problems that we would gladly take back. So that's why helping out other people actually helps out ourselves.
And you know, Rob, I as you said that, I just did a flashback to the Canyons 100-mile race that was held here a few weeks ago, and a group of us were volunteering at an aid station, and I was there through the night, probably a 12-hour shift, and I really, I mean, I made the commitment, so I was going to keep the commitment, but I was thinking, boy, I have so much other stuff I need to do this weekend but I still went and did it because I committed to do it. And I came away from that thinking there's nothing I could have done between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. Friday night, Saturday morning that could have made me better than what I did by volunteering. I came away with renewed excitement for racing. I started thinking I haven't raced in a few years now, and I don't know, for whatever reason, but I thought I loved what I saw out there. Not only the grit and the tenacity of these runners, but also watching other volunteers help those that were in need. And I just came away just revived, thinking there's nothing I could have done that would have compared to that 12-hour shift I did at that aid station. Here's my question for you. There is a quote in here, and I didn't get to this chapter, and so I'm going to ask you what this means. You say, become a balcony person, not a basement dweller. What do you mean by that?
I don't remember.
Oh.
I think so.
Are you serious?
No. I'm not as funny and witty, man. I just got to put that in there. Well, I mean, I kind of put it in there. It was just like, I mean, and nothing against people that live in their basement, right? But it's like, if I'm living in my parents' basement my whole life, like, there's a point that I want to get out of that basement. And balcony people are able to point out the areas that you can improve upon. So we give credence to balcony people, like they're the ones that are looking over there, and we give them permission to coach us up, right? Hey, if you're doing this well, you can do that situation better. So I think we have to have these balcony people that we have in our lives that can just be able to coach us up. And that was the point about creating that creating that network of people that we know, like, and trust, and it's creating that better us. And a better us makes a better you makes a better us. And again, no disrespect about anybody that's living in the basement. But I just don't think that's the ultimate goal, right? I think the ultimate goal is get out of that basement. But oftentimes it's like what we see is people want to bring you down instead of like building you up. And I think it's just too often it's prevalent in our society, right? People, they want you to be good. They don't want you to be great, because once you get great, once you start shining, then it just reveals their own inadequacies about themselves. So it's like, yeah, we want you to be good, but we don't want you to be great. Well, that's the part then, people pull you back down. So that's kind of what I meant by that point.
I think the people on the balcony are cheerleaders. They're the volunteers. They're the people passing on some wisdom. I mean, that's what I thought as I was reading through that. And the people in the basement, they're just not getting out. They're not experiencing life. They're not going to find a hinge point, because that basement probably is dark down there anyway. So they don't build or experience their own hinge point that lets them get out of that basement and move to the balcony. There's got to be a hinge on that basement door.
And that's the part where we need, we need somebody else out to be able to coach them up, And that's the part of so great about races is and I even speaking with the team last week, I told them, I just said, it's the best part about life is being in the race. It's participating, it's being part of it, because that's the part where it's like your preparation is meeting opportunity and you're hanging out with other people that are doing tough stuff. Nothing against virtual races. I'm just not a fan, because you're still kind of doing it on your own and then connecting with people. And there is power in that, but it's not the power of community that you can get from real life, putting yourself out there. And that's the part, man. That's why like Man in the Arena is such a great poem, because it's not the critic that counts, right? It's a person that is actually willing to do it and dare greatly for success and experience failure at the same time.
That reminds me, it's been a while since I've read that poem, and I'm going to make a note right now that if you haven't read that, I'm going to put a link in the show notes. You should read that. Before we started the podcast this morning, Don and I were talking about the law of abundance and scarcity. And I think that comes into play here, where as you were cresting that hill on your flat tire and these two separate people stop to help you, they're obeying the law of abundance, meaning at a race, let's say, at least in ultra running, if you finish the race, they're still going to have a belt buckle for you, or they're still going to have a race shirt for you. It's not like there's a finite number. There's 20 t-shirts that get given out to the first 20 finishers. That's not the way that it works. The law of abundance is out there that if you're even in business, you think, I have to be a little bit better than the other people so that I can move to the top of the heap. And I like you said earlier, I'll help you be good, but I'm not going to help you be great, because there's a competition here. And I think that once you get past that and think, if I can help that other person be great, maybe that's going to help me become better than if I was not to help them be great. And I think that that's an interesting thing. Is that what you were thinking when we were talking about that, Don?
Well, yeah, I was interested to see what you said after we talked this morning. And Dr. Rob, tell us a little bit about the scarcity mindset, because Scott did a great job, I think, about abundance. What about the person walking around in the scarcity mindset world?
Yeah, man, scarcity mindset. This is when I see it the most, right? You're on vacation and you get up real early to go down there and drop your towel onto where you want to camp out for a later day. Then you go out to breakfast. You don't come back for a couple of hours, right? That's a scarcity mindset. Believing that there's not going to be space out here for you to camp. Like, this has to be your spot. And that's where I look at it. I mean, and we see it kind of all the time, right? Well, what happens? Well, look, competition and cooperation. Competition beats cooperation all the time. And here's my point. Once somebody drops that towel down, what you'll see then is everyone else starts dropping their towel down because I've got to have this spot right here. Like, this is my piece of pie and I got to get it. So if we are playing pickup basketball, this, you can see it all the time. We're playing pickup basketball, right? Hey, but what we're doing, Don and Scott, is we're just shooting hoops, man. We're just playing around, man, trying to work on this and do that. And hey, Don, do you want to play one-on-one, right? Let's play one-on-one. Okay, great. Yeah, let's play one-on-one. We'll have a fun game of one-on-one, like we're enjoying it, doing it. And then what happens is Don elbows me. And now it's on. Now there's no more cooperation. There's no more having fun. Now it's, I'm going to beat your ass. I'm going to do whatever it takes to win, right? Because you just kind of checked me. So whenever competition and cooperation bump heads, competition is always going to win. And that's why the mindset has to be, and it's just one of those things that there is enough slices of pie for everybody. And I've got to be patient, but I have to have that mindset of I'm going to help out other people. And this was one of the best things about Zig Ziglar, what I always took from him, what he said, right, is if you help enough people get to where they want to go, you're going to get to where you want to go. If you help enough people reach their goals, you're going to reach your goals. And that's what the mindset has to be heading in. Because once we get in that competition, we're so focused on what we're doing that it doesn't resonate. There's no entry point there. So it has to be on what the mindset has to be going into really the day, that we've got to be focused on other people. And that's where I look at that abundance mindset.
Do you think that as society, culturally, we have conditioned ourselves to the scarcity mindset? There's one winner. There's somebody that had the highest grade in the class. There's somebody that has the best lawn on the block, whatever it might be. We've somewhat conditioned ourselves to think that way and not in the abundance mindset.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and there's many different facets to it. This is what I see. What we do is we use the wrong models. And what I mean by that. So we are going to take the best, the winner of Western states, and just focus on them, what they do. Yeah, we might focus on second and third because the story might be pretty neat, right? But we're just still focused on the first person. So if we're going to look at business, we look at Jeff Bezos. What did Jeff Bezos do? What did Elon Musk do? And you'll hear it in the conversations. Dude, it's the wrong model to use, right? If you're going to look at professional athletes, you're looking at the 0.0001%, not the person that picked up trail running and then it was like a sub 24. Like, geez, man, it's like you're not looking. So that's where I look at, hey, we use the wrong models, because when you're looking at just that model, well, yeah, in order to get to that level, there has to be a certain level of selfishness that comes to it. And that's where I'm just like, look, you're looking at the wrong models. You got to look at a different model in terms of how you want to approach it. And that different model encapsulates everybody and allows more inclusivity to, what you're going to be doing. No question.
So if I want to use that model, yeah, well, I'm going to let you continue talking about it because I need some clarification. So what kind of model do I want to look at? What lenses do I need to look through to live that?
Right. And that's where I look at it. I mean, like, my favorite models are two ladies here that run, and they don't win, but they really kick ass. And how do they train about it? And they're always focused on helping out other people, and they just have such a great heart. That's who I want to be like. So that's the model I use when it comes to trail run, that's who I want to be like. So I think it's like looking at an individual, and then when you get to see what their heart is like, what are they doing that I'm not doing? And then it's being able to look at that. So not just looking at the success and the absolute podium piece, because there's just too many factors that go into it. But it's like looking at, all right, what is that person doing? How is it that they have peace in their life? I want what they have. And now we're using a model that's going to be a little bit closer to where we are. And now that's how we get that. That's how we improve. That's how we get better.
I'm going to go back to that podium position of that long race, that we look to that person as the example or what we're striving for. And that's well, who won the race? Well, who's standing on that highest point of the podium? But I pose this question: who had the best race? Was it the person on that podium, or could it have been somebody that was mid-pack, that beat the odds, that performed their very best, that made the best decision for their race at any given time? That person may have had the best race of all.
Right.
In fact, the person up front may even made some bonehead mistakes, but had the natural ability to stay out in front. So the best race doesn't always go to the winner. It could be from somebody in the middle, mid-pack, or in the back of the pack.
Absolutely. And so that's the part of, well, that takes a lot more digging into trying to find that individual. And that's the importance of the relationships that we have, because if all we do is just focus on media is just going to be pointing out who is just at the mountaintop. And we've got to look at, hey, man, there's a lot more to it. So it's being able to pick out, hey, different models, and you phrase it any way you want, right? In terms of, but that's where I look at it. It's creating that relationships and knowing the journey and struggle that people go through. That becomes the important part. And that's how we create more of an abundance mentality.
As we're talking, something occurred to me. And I think back at some of the most fun I've had on training runs or races. And I can think of a couple experiences. One, Don can relate to both of them because they're people that we both know. And Rick Nelson is a friend of ours. And he and I ran AR50 one year. And we were both maybe not as well trained as we had hoped to be. And we went out with the idea that we're just gonna have fun. And it was the best day of my life. And one of the things that made it so great was we engaged with everybody on the course. So, contrast, you're at the top of the hill with a flat tire. Obviously, you need help. So these two nice people stopped to help you. Contrast that with maybe you don't have a flat tire and you're going down the hill, but you're still struggling, but it's not obvious. Engage with those people as well. I can't remember who said the quote. I think it's been attributed to a gazillion different people. I think I heard Benjamin Franklin said it, that if you think someone is having a crisis or not, you're probably 80% right that they're in a crisis. That was a very poor paraphrase. But the reason why I had so much fun with Rick Nelson on that race was it didn't matter if somebody was not having a good day or not and struggling where we could help. But we were also engaging with everybody. Hey, how's it going? Rick Nelson can sing the whole play Les Miserables without stopping, has a great voice. And we were singing Les Miserables as we were running down the trail. And another example, Don, that I'm going to mention, common friend Jeff Abel, he on training runs was the same kind of way. He would engage with everybody he came in contact with. It wasn't just, hey, good morning. Hey, good morning. It was, hey, how beautiful day out here. What you training for? And he would engage with those people. And so I think whether we knew it or not, we were probably helping some people.
Absolutely.
So I think that's what came to my mind. There's no question there. Just like observation.
That,
and
the
maybe
most
even
selfish thing you can do is to reach out to somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the story you mentioned, Tosh, earlier, that in the 200-mile race, the Tahoe race, and I was on the
Brian Contosh.
Brian Contosh. Thanks. Yeah, I'm laying on the side of the trail, and he comes running by, and he picked me up and said, "Let's go. Just look at my heels. Just stay with me, and we'll get through this." And I thanked him afterward, and he said, "No, I need to thank you. I needed that to keep me going. That was for me." And that was as a great real life lesson there. Mm-hmm. So if you're hearing some dead space, it was an internet problem. It had nothing to do with me having a podcast killer comment. You can fix that, right, Ryan? We'll see if he does. because I'm not even sure that Ryan listens to anything. I think he just leaves it in there. This is a challenge to see if that was in there or not for the listeners.
Hey, Rob, as you were writing the book and doing research, of course, you included some of your experiences, which is awesome, the stories and experiences you include in the book. But was there something that you learned while you were writing the book, or an aha through the research that you thought, ooh, that's good stuff?
Yeah, I mean, two pieces. One, interviewing top athletes that stopped their own race, whose livelihood depended on how they finished and why they would stop, help somebody else out. They always answered the same, I don't know. So it taught me that this was by design, it's not by default, right? Like their mindset was already, that's who they were as individuals. And then the other piece, actual research was done. We know the story of the Good Samaritan from the Bible, right? Like Good Samaritan, old man is on the side of the road, and everyone passes him. But the Samaritan stops. Now, the Samaritans and Jews did not cohabitate, right? Like they hated each other. And the Samaritan, though, takes this individual back into his house, nurses him back to health, hence the Good Samaritan. And so some researchers in the 70s actually wanted to do a study on that. So they wanted to replicate, hey, did the Good Samaritan, does this hold water? Does this story hold water? So what they did is they took a very homogeneous group. They went to a seminary school and they did this study. And they gave one group individuals that they were to read on what life was going to be like in the seminary. And then they were to walk across campus and then present that story to a group of students. And so that was like, the B group. The A group was they were primed to be thinking about the Good Samaritan. They were going to read the actual Good Samaritan. They were going to walk across campus and then present that story to a group of students. So they were primed to even be thinking about it. But they threw a little wrinkle into the study. They told one group of individuals, take your time heading over there. There's no rush. They're going to be there waiting for you. So they put them in a non-hurried condition. The other group is they told them, boy, you better hurry up and get over there. You're late. They put them in a hurried condition. And so then what the results showed, and the results were remarkable. See, it didn't matter whether people were primed to be thinking about the Good Samaritan or what life was going to be like in the seminary. It made no difference at all. The only difference that it made was a hurried condition or a non-hurried condition. People that were in a non-hurried condition stopped and helped the individual on their way across campus, stopped to help them 64% of the time. And that's what they did, right? They put somebody in the road, and were they going to help them? Would they stop? That was a research question. 64% of the time, they stopped and helped that individual. The people that were in the hurried condition, 10% of the time that they stopped and helped that person. This was just on campus, right? Very homogeneous group, seminary school. And so then it just, we're busier now than what we've ever done. This is by design. It's not by default. Unless we are primed to be focused on helping somebody else out or thinking about other people, it's just not going to happen. And that was the part of the research that really held water in terms of no one gets there alone. We've got to be thinking about people. And that's where it can start and can totally change our whole mindset and attitude and outlook on life, is if we just wake up, hey man, what are some people I need to reach out to today? How can I connect with other people? Our whole life changes.
And put yourself proactively in a situation where you're not in a hurry. I think that's the golden nugget I got from that maybe instead of knowing that it takes me an hour and a half to get from my house to my next job, instead of just leaving an hour and a half because that's what Google said it's going to take, leave 2 hours ahead. So I have a half-hour cushion. And then I may be in a mindset that if someone is stopped on the side of a road, I have the ability and the time to stop and help. So I love that study. That was a good aha for me, Rob.
Thanks, Scott.
Hey, if we were out on a run, Rob, I would ask this question because I would be curious, and maybe I know part of the answer, but maybe not the the angle you're going to put to it, you do more than just write a bunch of great books. Puke and Rally, No One Gets There Alone. There's a number of them, and I wish I could name them all because we've even done some on the podcast. But you're an athlete too. You've run 100 miles. You've done triathlons. You've done great things. So you know what you're speaking about of you against yourself. Your biggest competitor is you. You'll learn that stuff when you spend so much time out there by yourself. But you've done other things too. You coach on the PGA to professional football teams or baseball teams. I don't know. That's what I want to know about. Where do you practice this Dr. Rob Bell stuff in environments that would make us say, I'm glad he told me that story? What organizations utilize this kind of mindset and learn from it? And to copy Scott, let me ask 5 questions in one. What about what kind of things do you see with those elite groups? Do you see them throughout society? Are they elite because they do everything right, or they have the same hangups as us? So if you can find 3 or 4 questions in there, go ahead. I'm ready.
I appreciate you making me do the work. Usually, like, you tee it up for me and just let me hit it. You know, I mean, that's like a hard.
No one gets there alone.
Yeah.
No one gets there alone. Not even my question. Yeah.
I can answer this. So
Scott, you can weigh in.
Yeah. Work with high athletes, achievers, sales executives. They struggle with the same exact things. Everyone struggles with the same exact thing. It's just a different level of what they're dealing with, right? So there might be another 0 to it, right? But it's the same exact action of what we're doing. And that's why the solution on this one is always the same, man. It's just get outside your own head by being able to focus on somebody else. You help yourself out at the same time. It's the biggest thing that you can do. That's the one that I got out of that, man. Was there another question?
I have one that I picked out of there, out of that weave of questions. Do the top athletes that you have been around, do they stop and help? And is that one of the things that helps them be at their level? Because a lot of times I think Tiger Woods only thinks about Tiger Woods, and he doesn't think about anybody else.
So there we go, right, Scott? What are the models that we're using? So if we want to use Tiger Woods as an example, we're looking at 0.0001%. That's why we need to broaden the scope and look at a bigger width of models to use. And that was the importance of that one, man. If you look at just the 0.001%, highly selfish, highly do absolutely whatever it takes, that's the wrong model to use. Now, if you want to look at some very, very successful people that are out there that have peace in their life and have taken their craft to help out other people, boy, that's the best part, man. And there's just so many people out there that help out others get to where they want to go and use their ability as a platform to do that. That's the best type of athlete, man.
And it helps us become happier.
Right, man.
Right? That's one of the goals we should have is, what can we do to be happier? And if we're helping people, I can't remember any time in my life where I've helped somebody and come away not happier.
Exactly, man.
Yeah, maybe even becoming better humans, Scott. Maybe it took.
I wasn't even talking about running. Is this a running podcast?
No, I was just trying to tie your intro into this ending. I thought, that would be full circle, that we actually are doing what you protest that we do, become better people.
Hey, Rob, this book is really great. And I love the part at the very beginning where you kind of describe some of your books, that they're a good airplane read. And that's what this is. It's not a big dissertation. It's a good book that you could sit down in a couple evenings, depending on how fast you read or how slow you want to digest the information in this book. You should get it. It's called No One Gets There Alone. It can reinforce some of the good attitudes and good practices that you have in your life, or make you rethink how you can do it better within your life, whether that's sports, whether that's business, whether that's relationships. This relates to all of them.
Appreciate you guys, man. Really, you guys are awesome.
Another strong book, Dr. Rob Bell. And if you get the book, turn to page 137, a great chapter called Train the Pain or Experience the Pain. And if that makes you curious, get the book, because Rob goes through that and puts a different perspective on it. And I just loved it. And so, yeah, I'm with you. All your books are great. This one I enjoyed too.
So grab yourself a book, read it on the plane, then get off the plane and go run.
Well, help somebody along the way, and then run Moss.
Moss.